we have gotten ready to hear our story. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. This is the desert bag. We're back in the desert. It's important that we have a piece of the desert here at church because so many important things happen to the people of God there. The desert is a dangerous place. There is very little food and water. Without food and water, we die. When the wind blows, the desert changes shape. You can lose your way. The sun scorches down. So people wear many layers of clothing to protect their skin from the sun and the blowing sand. The sand can hurt your face and your hands. And at night, it is very cool. So people wear many clothes to stay warm. This is Jerusalem. Here are the walls of the city. Inside is the temple for God. Here are the people of God. They knew God was in the temple, but they also thought that was the only place you could pray to God. The people believed that the wall of the city would protect them from everything. Then the Assyrians came and attacked the city. It was a terrible time. People fought. Many starved to death. Finally, the Assyrians went away. Then the Babylonians came, and they did not go away. Their king wanted Jerusalem for himself. They destroyed the walls of the city and burnt the temple. They took the people away from the city. Very few were left in the land. Behind them, they could see the smoke of the burning city, and they wondered if they would ever get to see it again. the soldiers marched the people of God across the desert. They had to get up when the soldiers said. They had to eat when the soldiers said. They had to go to bed when the soldiers said. They grew weary, and many died. It took a long time. The people of God were in exile. They could not go home. When they came to Babylon, they hung their harps on the weeping willow trees, and they sang sad songs. They dreamed of Jerusalem, but they could not go back. They even faced Jerusalem when they said their prayers. Slowly, the people began to understand that God was in this place too. God's presence came to them as they gathered to read scripture and tell the old stories and to pray. The king allowed many of the people to work. They opened small stores, and many worked for the king. It was a great shock when the king of Persia came and took Babylon for himself. Some of the people were allowed to go back. Some went with Ezra. They began to rebuild the temple. More were allowed to return. They went with Nehemiah. They rebuilt the walls of the city. The people of God were no longer in exile. They could go home. Do you know what happened? Not all of them went. Now they knew God was in this strange and foreign land. So some of them stayed because God was there too. Now I wonder what part of this story you liked best. I wonder what part is most important. I wonder where you are in this story, or what part of this story is about you. I wonder if there is any part of this story we could take out and still have all the story we need. I wonder. I'd like to share some thoughts to help us keep reflecting on this story. To be human is to go to many new places, sometimes to live and work, sometimes to explore, sometimes to try new foods. To be human is to have to go to many new places. And sometimes we don't want to go because we don't know what it's going to be like. Sometimes we have to go because maybe we don't feel well, so we have to go to the doctor or the hospital so that we can become well. Sometimes we have to go because something in our family changed. There was a divorce, or someone lost a job, or someone died, or someone has to start at a new school or a new job. Sometimes we want to go, but we're just not sure what it will be like. We're just not sure if God will be there. We want to know that this new place will be okay, that it won't be too much. We won't be too worried or too scared or too sad or too alone or too afraid or too unsure. Of course we don't. We're human. And so we worry that God might not be there. We get scared of being scared. Sometimes we even act like we really can control everything. Do you know what happens next? We find our courage and we go to those new places. And then, that's my favorite part, and then we find that God is there. Because of course God would be there. God couldn't be anywhere else. I remember in high school being so scared of going to a high school dance, and I was worried that I would go alone, I would spend the whole night by myself, and then I would just call to get picked up early. And my best friend Gwen called and asked if we could go together. And we did, and I wasn't alone at all. God had showed up before I had even left the house. I remember too, on the very first day of university for me, I was going to the States and there was a major power outage, a brownout. And I remember thinking, maybe now I don't have to go to university. I thought that maybe one power outage could get me out of 4 years of school. I had signed up, I had said yes, I wanted to go. I had decided that is what I wanted to do. And still, and still I was afraid. I knew that it wasn't that God was in the power outage, because that was my fear and my worry talking. If it still sounds like fear and worry, maybe being anxious or dreading, or maybe feeling scared and alone, that's not the part of God showing up. That's still our fear talking. God did show up in my very first roommate, who was kind and gentle and showed me the way. Like we've been practicing finding ourselves in these stories, figuring out what part of this story is about us, it takes practice to notice where God shows up. It takes practice knowing what it looks like and what it feels like. And when we pause, sometimes it helps me to pause and breathe in that moment, or to look back at the end of the day and look for the times that I laughed or I cried, or I was being taken care of, or I wasn't alone. To look for those moments, to look for the people that showed up on God's behalf, to look at the peace that I felt, maybe through creation or time or people or places. And when we notice those moments, we rest in knowing that God is here, because there's nowhere else God would rather be. For God is waiting to be found and waiting to find us. Thanks be to God. Here are the people of God who stayed in a new place. The people of God who returned home. Our cities of Haran and Babylon, and our great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And this whole place.